Hi guys, welcome back to Be on the Beat. So today I'm doing the episode by myself, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite actually, just my favorite band of all time, Radiohead. So first I'm going to give a little bit introduction about the band, their origin story, and then I'm going to go into a small deep dive of the albums. I tried to do a little bit of the songs, but I realized how much time that would take, and a lot to talk about, but I'm super passionate about this topic and I'm super excited to share with you guys today. Okay, let's get into it. Radiohead is a British rock group that arguably changed the whole industry and pioneered, along with other bands, 90s alternative music, which I will be talking about next episode with my dad. Radiohead formed in the mid 1980s at a school in Oxfordshire, and the group consisted of the lead singer, Tom York, the bassist, Colin Greenwood, the guitarist, Ed O'Brien, the drummer, Phil Selway, and the guitarist and keyboardist, Johnny Greenwood. The band, who at the time called themselves On a Friday, had attracted attention for their demo tape, Manic Honey. Colin Greenwood would give an A&R rep from EMI the demo, and at EMI's request, the band changed its name to Radiohead and was signed to EMI-owned labels Parlophone in the UK and Capitol Records in the US in 1991. Okay, so now I'm going to be starting to deep dive into each album and kind of give my own little review and input, and then also tell you guys some of my favorite songs off the albums. Okay, so Radiohead put out their debut album, Pablo Honey, in 1993. This album isn't most loved by a lot of Radiohead fans, including me, but it's truly an enjoyable album that has the clay that Radiohead would later use to shape its next albums. Um, this album contains the hit single that everyone knows and loves, Creep. This powerful song is extremely vulnerable and heartbreaking, with lyrics that are especially vulnerable to Tom York. The song was about his obsession with self-loathing and feeling like an outsider. The song today is one of Radiohead's most successful, and is loved by the public, but the band grew to hate it over time. Their next albums, their song evolved, and they felt that Creep overshadowed a lot of their best works. Tom York had a personal dislike for the song because he thought the lyrics were crap. Radiohead found the success of the single suffocating and rarely plays it even live. And Radiohead would go on and talk about that in a lot of their different singles and a lot of different previous albums about how the success for that song kind of ruined them in a way. My favorite tracks out of Pablo Honey is probably Blowout. This song features a lot of the newer Radiohead you hear today, but yeah, it was one of the more experimental off the album, and I loved it so much. So yeah. The next album Radiohead put out is The Bends. This by far is one of my top 5 Radiohead albums. Released in 1995, The Bends was a huge step up from Pablo Honey. It takes lyrics that are still tormented, but now are more ambitious. He mixes 3 different vocal types smoothly throughout the album. He goes from singing to falsetto and then to screaming. In my opinion, there's not a lot of weak tracks on this album, and it is one that you can play no skips. My favorite off this album include High and Dry, Bulletproof, I Wish I Was, Nice Dream, Fake Plastic Trees, and yeah. Radiohead's next studio album is also one of my top 3. OK Computer, which was released in 1997, this album is considered to a lot of people as perfection. Radiohead genre fused throughout the album by adding traditional rock elements and blending with electronic music, jazz, and avant-garde genres, creating a unique and different sound. Radiohead experimented a lot with different instruments. Sound layering, manipulation, and synth drum loops, orchestral arrangements were all used in this album. OK Computer has amazing tracks. It's almost a completely no-skip album, but some of my favorites are Airbag, Lucky, Exit Music for a Film, No Surprises, Coming Up Police, and Climbing Up the Walls. Honestly, all the tracks are amazing. Okay, Radiohead's 4th album was released in 2000 and is one of my top 3 Radiohead albums. This one is one of the most creative projects. With the lack of drums and guitar, the album features some of the more unknown instrument albums, including the Prophet 5 synthesizer, Rhodes piano, drum machines, and Moldar synthesizers. This time for Radiohead was extremely drooling. They had just finished their OK Computer tour and suffered from exhaustion and were all drained. But Tom York specifically suffered from burnout and writer's block. Tom eventually abandoned the traditional songwriting methods and took creative control for this album and just kind of went out of his comfort zone. And I think I really love this album. I know that when it first came out, it wasn't particularly like loved, but I feel like as we've kind of grown and seen more of Radiohead, I feel like this album is, I think, one of Radiohead's best. My favorite songs off this project are How to Disappear Completely, Idiotech, Optimistic, and Motion Picture Soundtrack. Amnesiac is Radiohead's fifth album released in 2001. This album is known to a lot of people as Kiday's B-sides, but I think it's a lot more overlooked than just Kiday's seconds. It's more like a continuation instead of a second part. Instead of going into the futuristic elements in Kiday, Amnesiac feels more vintage. The whole album talks a lot about identity. My favorite tracks from this album include Pyramid Song, You and Who's Army, and Knives Out. Hell of the Thief was released in 2003, Radiohead's sixth album, and it was inspired by anti-Bush protests, and it is an extremely political album talking about themes of government manipulation and social control. Some of my favorite tracks on this album include 2 plus 2 equals 5, There, and Wolf at the Door. Radiohead's seventh album is my favorite, and I consider it a masterpiece. Released in 2007, In Rainbows explores themes of life, love, and death. Before releasing Pablo Honey's, Radiohead's contract with EMI was for 6 albums. After fulfilling their contract, Radiohead became free agents. They made a groundbreaking decision to self-release this album using a pay-what-you-want method. You could pay any price, including zero. This changed the whole industry, and some of my favorite tracks off of this album include Nude, Weird Fishes, All I Need, and House of Cards, and Jigsaw Falling into Place. In 2011, Radiohead released King of Limbs. This album is only 37 minutes long and is most electronic-oriented album of their discography. And although this album is not my favorite, I do have some favorite tracks, including Lotus Flower and Codex. Following King of Limbs, 5 years later, A Moon-Shaped Pool was released. Their ninth album is what I consider the most heartbreaking. The whole album feels like a dream. The album incorporates drum machines, synthesizers, guitar, piano, string, and chorale arrangements. The lyrics are heavy, with the representation of the heartbreak from Tom York's divorce in 2016. My favorite tracks off this album include Daydreaming, Glass Eyes, and True Love's Wait. This is one of my favorite bands, and every single track is unique in its own way. Every single project, every single album. I think it's so cool. I think, really, Radiohead changed the music industry so much because you really can't find a group like Radiohead nowadays, or even before. They're just so experimental and so creative and so willing to try something new and to step out of the mold the industry has put them in. And I think showing that they could have a hit single like Creep and have everyone want them to do more of that, and for them to break out of that and do something completely different that some people hated and some people loved. I think so many people can connect with them and their lyrics and how they're so meaningful and how you can take them so many ways. I think really no one knows what, like, when I was trying to figure out what to talk about with each songs, when I was trying to figure that out, because I would go on forever, because there are so many different meanings of Radiohead songs you can interpret. The thing about, Tom York's mind is that you can take it in so many different ways. You can, like, a lyric can be presented to you with one meaning or a million. There's really truly, and like, even when I was talking about some of the weaker albums on Radiohead's discography, a weak album and a weak Radiohead album is like 10 times better than any other album in my opinion. So like, I don't know, I just love Radiohead so much, and I think they changed the industry even with the pay what you want method, and when they first released In Rainbows, that just it opened up a whole new thing for digital music and starting that. And I just, yeah, they're truly one of my favorite bands, and I love them so much. And I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about them and their geniusness. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you learned a little bit about Radiohead. And check them out if you haven't really paid much attention to them, because they're truly just like such an amazing band, and I love them so much.